Our share of stories about police corruption, but none as astonishing as the one you're about to hear. It's the story of two New York City police officers who stand accused of moonlighting as hitmen for the Mafia. Louis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa, two highly decorated former detectives, were indicted last month for the murders of 8 people, murders committed on the orders of a vicious mob boss who is now in jail. That mobster is Anthony Gaspipe Casso. He told us about his extraordinary relationship with the two cops in the only interview he has ever given.
I had law enforcement on my payroll, so I had them looking after me.
On your payroll?
Right.
Cops?
Yeah, the cops.
I spoke to Anthony Gaspipe Casso in 1998 in prison, where he began serving a life sentence after admitting to 36 murders. Casso said detectives Louis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa helped him commit 8 of those murders. His claims couldn't be substantiated at the time, so we couldn't air them until now that the detectives have been indicted. Prosecutors say for a hefty salary, Eppolito and Caracappa would walk right up to Casso's enemies, trick them into believing they were under arrest, and instead kidnap and deliver them to Casso to be executed. That's exactly what Casso told us the detectives did to a young hood named Jimmy Heidel, whom he believed had tried to kill him.
Louis and Steve went by a club where the kid was staying. They believed they were going to arrest him. They put him in the car. I used to have cars for him. I gave him a car for this, like a police car, an unmarked car. I gave him the car. They put him in the car. The kid thought they were taking him to the station house, but they took him to a garage. When they got him to the garage, they laid him on the floor. They tied his feet, his hands, cuffs, put him in the trunk of the car, right? The police car comes in, the guy's kicking in the trunk. He's making noise. And I took him to a place that I had prearranged, somebody's house that I could use, pulled the car in the driveway. I brought him in there, sat him down. I wanted to know why I was shot and who told you and who else was involved and who, and who gave you the orders to shoot me. After that, I killed the kid. Myself.
You killed it?
Right.
Was it just one shot to the head?
No, I didn't shoot him in the head. I didn't shoot him. I was in somebody's house. You make a mess. I shot him a couple of times. I didn't torture the kid. I didn't do anything like that.
Well, what's a couple?
More than a couple. It's a couple. Really, I don't know the exact amount. Maybe I shot him 10 times, 12 times.
Maybe 15 even.
It could have been 15. At that time, I gave Louis and Steve, I think, $45,000 for them delivering them to me.
These are the two cops?
Right.
You gave them a bonus for delivering someone to you killed?
Right. Well, they wanted to kill him for me. I didn't even have to do that. They were going to get him, kill him, and throw him, do whatever I wanted to do with him.
What's more, prosecutors say Casso used the two cops to commit a range of dirty deeds. They allegedly tapped into the NYPD database and funneled confidential police information to him, including wiretaps and police surveillance containing addresses and other key details about Casso's enemies. One by one, prosecutors say, Casso had them killed, with a little help from his two friends on the NYPD. Casso's allegations have stunned even the most hardened lawmen who worked on the case, like Brooklyn District Attorney Charles Hines.
And I was shocked, because for all of the experience I've had over the years with police corruption cases, I've never had anything like this.
You never saw anything that came close to that?
I've seen organized corruption cases, but the allegation of two cops being hitmen, in addition to giving up people for hits, just absolutely shocking.
All the more shocking given that the detectives have received hundreds of commendations for bravery and excellence in the line of duty. Louis Eppolito is among the most decorated cops in NYPD history. Amazing considering his family. Eppolito's father, known as Fat the Gangster, was a mob enforcer, and his uncle, Jimmy the Clam, a Mafia captain. In the end, the federal prosecutor who indicted Eppolito says he couldn't resist the murderous life of the mob.
For years, Eppolito and Caracappa were cops. Mafia cops.
It's an obscenity, Ed, that kind of allegation. It's scurrilous. It's not true. This is me speaking. I'm Lou's lawyer.
Bruce Cutler, who became famous representing mobster John Gotti, is now defending Louis Eppolito against charges that he worked for mob boss Anthony Casso.
Let me ask you, Ed, why would somebody who went up the ladder in the police department, received awards for bravery above and beyond the call of duty, why would you besmirch and tarnish everything you stand for, Ed, to do the bidding of a reprobate like Casso?
If your client is innocent of all of the charges, why, out of all of the officers in the New York City Police Department, did Anthony Casso choose him to say this about?
I can't give you the motive. I never could, I never will, I never could understand it. And I've tried so many federal cases where witnesses like Casso, who want to get out from under, blame others. And especially if it's sexy, if it's appealing. And when you shake the police department like that, it becomes a front-page case.
Louis Eppolito made front-page news for the first time back in 1984 in a case unrelated to Anthony Casso. He was charged with passing files to another mobster under investigation. Eppolito was eventually cleared, but felt betrayed by the police department for suspecting him in the first place. And he said so publicly.
I worked my ass off. I worked my balls off for the city of New York, and all I got was you're Italian, and you had family members that were in organized crime.
This is Detective Eppolito in a 1985 documentary about anger. He had answered a filmmaker's ad in a local newspaper seeking people who were having difficulty controlling their anger. Listen to the depth of his rage as he recalls what he said to his bosses when, while under investigation, they called him in and made him surrender his badge.
I said, if you keep insisting on f***ing with me, I said, I'm going to give you a beating that your mother's going to throw up when I show you a picture. I said, I'm not bull***ing you. I said, don't try to go at me any more than you're doing. I said, because the 4 guys with you got to realize by the time they get up, I said, I'm going to break your nose and take your teeth out at one shot. And the anger started to come.
A year after he gave this interview, prosecutors say Eppolito committed his first murder for Casso and kept on killing well after he retired in 1990. He later wrote his autobiography called Mafia Cop, the story of an honest cop whose family was the mob. He also built a new career for himself as an actor.
I know I'd go from rags to riches.
In Goodfellas, he played, of all things, a mobster.
How you doing, buddy?
He appeared in more than a dozen films, including one he wrote himself, in which he portrayed a corrupt union boss who crosses the mafia. But in real life, prosecutors say it was Eppolito and his former partner Stephen Caracappa who were doing the killing. They say that for some extra cash, the detectives actually went so far as to pull the trigger themselves. Casso told me the 2 cops brazenly murdered a crime family associate named Eddie Lino after forcing him off a New York City highway.
I gave them $75,000. They killed him cowboy style. They pulled alongside of him. They shot him. They made him crash into the fence alongside the Bell Parkway on the service road. Right? Then Steve got out of the car, ran across the street, and finished shooting him, finished killing him in the car. Then they got back in and they went away.
Nobody in their right mind would go into any kind of activity with Casso because he was a raving, screaming lunatic.
Ed Hayes insists his client, Stephen Caracappa, never committed a single crime for mobster Anthony Gaspipe Casso, much less a murder along a crowded highway.
Can't imagine a riskier thing to do. It's the Bell Parkway at a time when it's very busy. It's not as if there's not going to be people going by and very likely police cars. So it seems like almost a movie version of a crime. It's something, the kind of thing you could see Casso making up.
But someone did it.
That's right.
And they're saying that your guy did it.
That's right. They're saying that he did it. My guy says he didn't. Nobody would take Casso's word for anything.
Prosecutors say Casso has, in fact, lied as a federal witness in past cases.
They killed Eddie
But
Lino.
in this case, they believe the stories he told us about Eppolito and Caracappa. For years, though, prosecutors couldn't corroborate his allegations until an ex-cop named Tommy Dades helped break the case wide open. After receiving a tip, Detective Dades came out of retirement as a boxing coach. and went to work in the offices of the Brooklyn District Attorney, digging through old Mafia case files.
You sat in an office for months by yourself, pouring through records, computer files, phone logs.
I would go over as much information to try and come up with a mistake that they made here, a mistake that they may have made there.
Was there a moment when you said, I got him?
There was a moment that got me very excited, that I knew I was on the right track.
Dades discovered that Detective Caracappa, who worked in the organized crime unit, had run a search on the police department computer and got an address for a man named Nicky Guido. Guido was one of the people Casso thought was part of the team sent to assassinate him. A month later, at that very same address, Nicky Guido was gunned down. Louise Carbonaro is his cousin.
I remember my mom calling me, screaming on the phone, Louise, Louise, they killed Nicky. She said, they shot Nicky. They put 9 bullets in him, and he's dead.
They said in the news that this was a mob hit.
Yes.
How did that impact the family?
Oh, my gosh. Well, we couldn't believe it, knowing Nicky. But then there were the questions. Did he lead a double life, you know?
The truth is, he did not lead a double life. Prosecutors say Caracappa mistakenly gave Anthony Casso the address for the wrong Nicky Guido and led Casso to kill an innocent man.
You know, they glorify organized crime in these movies and all, and they always say, well, they just kill each other. Innocent people don't die. I'm sorry, innocent people do die. They made a mistake, and they hit my cousin by mistake.
So just a case of mistaken identity.
That was it. Senseless. A senseless killing.
The appearance here is that your client runs the name Nicky Guido through a police department computer, and then within a month, Nicky Guido gets 9 bullets to his body.
Yes, but Caracappa would have been in a perfect position to find out if he was the right Nicky Guido or the wrong Nicky Guido. That's not a mistake that Caracappa could have made.
There's an argument that maybe they were just sloppy.
Yes, I agree with that. But in this country, you don't convict on an argument. You have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Federal prosecutors say they can meet that burden and now claim to have several witnesses with direct knowledge that detectives Caracappa and Eppolito were hitmen. Tommy Dades, like many other law enforcement officials, is still trying to comprehend the allegation that 2 highly decorated police officers crossed so far over the thin blue line.
You raise your right hand when you swear into the police academy, and you're there to uphold the law and to do the right thing. To actually go out and murder somebody and then go back to work, it takes a certain type of individual to be able to go to sleep at night after that. And they were probably never cops. They were just criminals that slipped through the system and obtained shields,
Louis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa are in jail awaiting trial. If convicted, they each face life in prison.
Known sometimes as the counselor by his friend Tom Wolfe, he is an attorney whose clients have included such notable figures as Anna Wintour and Daniel Libeskind and P. Diddy. He is currently representing retired New York City Police Detective Stephen Caracappa against charges he was employed by the Mafia. His new book is called Mouthpiece, A Life in and Just Outside the Law. I am pleased to welcome Eddie Hayes back to this table. Welcome back.
Thank you, Spuddy. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure, because if anybody, you are what they call a New York character. This book is dedicated to Tom Wolfe.
Right.
Except for my family, this life has given me no greater gift than his friendship.
Oh, he exemplifies every character quality I admire. He's a great reporter. He's a great historian in terms of focusing on the world around him, and he's been the most loyal friend to me for 30 years. I mean, he's everything you could hope for in a friend and as somebody to look up to.
Let me just go through your own biography.
Right.
You were born?
Queens.
Queens.
In Sunnyside.
And what you called it what? What kind of neighborhood?
Well, it was an Irish and Italian neighborhood, but I mean, we used to call it white boys. I mean, we white boys. Right.
Yeah. Went to the University of Virginia.
Yeah, I did. My father had worked there for a while in Charlottesville, and to him that represented the epitome of success. I'll never forget, I came home one day and my mother says, I applied for early decision. I was the guy in the school that never got good grades and always #1 on these aptitude tests.
Yeah.
So I come home, my mother's hysterical crying. I said, Mommy, what are you crying about? What's so bad? She said, Eddie, you got into university? I said, she said, you heard from the University of Virginia. I said, Mommy, that's okay. I'll get into school someplace. It's all right. You know, I had no concept that I would actually go to the University of Virginia. I had gotten like a 99 on my SATs. Right. And she says, no, you got in. I said, get out of here, Mommy. She says, no, you're going to the University of Virginia. And that's how I went.
And then to Columbia Law School.
And I went to Columbia Law School. Same thing for the University of Virginia was different because at the University of Virginia I had a lot of leadership positions, and the Columbia Law School was hoping they would get at least one guy that wasn't going to try to blow up the school. So that's I think that's why they let me in.
Your dad.
Right. My dad, as how I view him then or as how I view him now. My father grew up in a virtually exclusively Irish neighborhood. He was a drunk. Virtually a very high percentage of the men that he knew were drunks. His father was a drunk. Of my 4 grandparents, 3 of them were orphans. All right? And on the Irish guys, there were a lot of drunks. If they had had the medication that you have now, then, they could have treated him and he probably wouldn't have these problems. But I didn't know that then. He was a very brutal man to me, my brother, my sister, my mother, so I had a very harsh relationship with him. But as I say in a book, it's kind of haunts me that I could never bring myself to reconcile with him or work that out. But I wrote about it because I think a lot of people, especially from the socioeconomic level that I come from, they start off in life with these kinds of problems and they don't understand that there's a solution. You know, that other people have the same problems.
What's the solution?
Well, the solution, first of all, is to educate yourself as to what the problem is. So if you grow up in a very harsh circumstances, you go to the library, you go to a teacher, you go to a counselor, you say, why is my father beating me? Why is my father a drunk? Why is my mother a drug user? Something like that. You educate yourself, and then you try and find a solution. There are lots of people out there that will help you. And there's a lot of good people in our schools that will help you and in the community. A lot of times you go to a religious leader. I wish I had had the sense to go to a priest. You know, but I didn't have the sense to go to a priest when I was a kid.
In fact, you have said holidays were a terrible time.
Oh, because he was always drunk. It was always terrible. Holidays were terrible. I mean, you used to get hit out of your chair. I mean, literally, you'd sit down, you know, bada bing, as they say, and he'd smack you right out of the chair. And that was bad. You know, and also Christmas Day was always terrible. But, you know, he didn't know any better. I mean, he just didn't know any better. I wish now I could go back then. I've taken so many people and said, look, you think that your life is over. I'm going to grab you by the throat. I'm going to get you out of this. I can't do that with him. The guy's dead.
You've been in therapy 30 years.
30 years. Not anymore. I don't go anymore. But it helped me a lot. I mean, I've been going to the gym for 40 years. Right?
So it's a lot too.
That helped me a lot too. So you know, you go and you learn about it. And I've been reading 2, 3, 4, 5 books a week for 45 years. Right? So but that's the same.
Therapy was to help you understand your father, or just help you understand yourself?
I think it was to help me understand. At the time, I first went into therapy because I wanted to learn to talk to women. I said, there's got to be a way to do this. So I said, okay. So I got a woman therapist. I got a very nice Spanish therapist, lovely woman, and I used to go in there once a week and I talked to her. It's like practice, you know? Well, before that, I only wanted to ask one question, and I only wanted one answer. Will you? And yes, that's it.
Now, there is this. When you were in law school, you began becoming a street character.
Right.
You fell in love with the street and all the characters on the street.
Well, the thing is, I didn't like law school. I wasn't cut out for law school. I had to work virtually around the clock to support myself. And I did like to go out all night.
Yeah.
And I don't drink. And I love going to Times Square and hanging around. And I actually I liked it. I liked going into after-hours clubs at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I found that was a life that I could function in very competently, and I enjoyed it.
And also you found yourself able to communicate with people from every ethnic sexual behavior known to humankind.
Yeah, and some that most people don't know about. Very few people don't. But the thing about it, whoops. Some people, the thing about it is most people are pretty decent. And I mean, the whole concept of, you know, religion is the idea that people strive for salvation. And I'm Catholic, so Catholics is we strive for salvation, we try to do good, and if you don't, something really terrible will happen. So that's sort of my philosophy of life, and sometimes I'm something really terrible.
Yeah. All right, we'll get to that too. Now, so this is all true stuff here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Was it hard to write it?
No, I had a great co-writer. Susan Lehman was great.
You just talked to her.
I talked to her, and you know, I loved her. I mean, she's sort of a strange partner. I mean, she has nothing in common with that life. But she was great, and she's a very hard worker. And, you know, I love journalists. I mean, as I always tell everybody, you know, I'd rather represent a journalist making $40,000 or $60,000 a year than a movie star making $50 million. And so you learn to read the paper.
Because they are reporters and they
I love reporters. I do. I tell you the truth. I love reporters. They're my favorite clients. They do work that's God's work. If it wasn't for them, we'd all be, we'd be living in a dictatorship. And I really like reporters. And they're funny. You get a guy that writes, it's all like you. I mean, I said to you before we went on the air, this is the Ed Hayes. Tell people, answer people's questions that they want asked.
Yeah. What are they curious about? And that's what you got to respond to.
That's right.
And you've known a lot of them, and you have great friendships with all of them. And part of that is why you're so successful, don't you think?
I think I have very good friends, and I'm a very loyal guy.
You have very good friends in at least two areas of life. One, the police department.
Right.
And two, reporters.
Right. Both very hard people who have to deal with the reality of life and aren't putting up with anything. So I sort of feel if I could be their friends, that's a pretty good reference.
All of a sudden, you meet Andy Warhol.
I met him at a party. I was chasing a girl. I went in after the girl. I picked the lock with a knife. I used to see this girl in the street, and I wanted, I wanted to go in and see her. I saw her go into a building. I went down to the building, and I don't think they have them much anymore, but they had locks then. If you slipped the knife in, you could press it back and go up the stairs. So I went up the stairs looking for her, and I found her, and I met him. He pinched me. That's how the first time I met him.
Because?
Well, I didn't look, I was cuter when I was young. Not so cute anymore.
And you said, I can get you out of anything.
I did.
That's what you told him.
I told him.
And so he made a note that night?
Yes, it's in his diaries, yeah.
I met a guy named Eddie Hayes who says he can get you out of anything.
That's right.
Because he collected characters like you collect characters.
And also the other thing is at the time I was 28 years old. I ran 5 miles a day. I did 500 push-ups in the morning. I went to karate lessons 3 times a week. I went to weightlifting 3 times a week. And I worked when I wasn't doing that and chased after girls. I mean, I worked. You know what I mean? I can work.
Yeah. And then one night you get a call.
Yeah, I got a call actually about 6 o'clock in the morning that he had died. And
he had a gallbladder operation.
Yeah, he drowned. Seriously, they forgot to. They put water in you, and they're supposed to take the water out. They put the water in, they forgot to take it out. So the thing about it is they wake me up. My wife is pregnant, and the guy says, "Come in. I want you to represent me." I said, "Represent you?
Who came in and said this?
Fred Hughes called me on the phone. He says, "Come in." I says, "I can't come in." I said, "My wife is pregnant." He says, "You got to come in, Eddie. You got to come in." I said, "Look, talk to my wife. Tell her I got to come in, and then I'll come in." So I came in. It was a big adventure.
Now, you're suggesting also in the book, though, that they called you because they couldn't get anybody else. They were all out of town, or it was a weekend.
6 o'clock in the morning. I answer my phone at 6 o'clock in the morning. A normal person is asleep. 6 o'clock in the morning, you call me.
They
and
don't have their phone number.
That's right. That's right. If you want to call me, call me.
And what did that do for you? What kind of relationship?
That people called me like that?
No.
The Andy Warhol thing. The Andy Warhol thing, the best part was not the 5 or 6 years that were great, one success after another, the enormous good we did for his reputation. The best part was when I got hit in the head and got knocked down and came up. Because
okay, I'll get to coming up. I mean, you're way ahead of the story. All right, so you represented the estate.
Yeah. What I did was, see, Charlie, I didn't know...
Fred Hughes was the executive of the estate?
What I didn't know any better. I thought that when you had a guy that could paint, the idea was to go to people and say, this guy is a great painter. It's like a trial. You're telling a story. So that's what we did. Most trust and estates lawyers, they make big, long lists. Everything is that. There's a risk here, and there's a risk here, and don't do this, and don't do that. I said, wait a minute. At the time, his reputation was not so certain. I said, look at this guy. This stuff is beautiful. So Hughes said, I agree. Hughes thought it was beautiful, too. So we showed it to everybody, and everybody loved it. Hughes was a bright guy.
And so all of a sudden, the estate was worth a lot more.
Oh, it was worth so much money. But you try a case, you win. I mean, the whole thing in life is to take a risk.
So how did you get from there to bankruptcy?
Oh, well, okay. What happened was we had a dispute over what the estate is worth. Okay, it's sort of an accounting scandal, right? I think I was prematurely anti-accounting scandal, like these guys that were prematurely anti-fascist.
You mean like Enron is an accounting scandal?
Enron is an accounting. This is not dissimilar. There's two sides. You give the money to a foundation, right? The foundation has an incentive to keep the value as low as possible for many reasons. They have to distribute less. They can give sweetheart deals when they sell the paintings, all kinds of reasons. Plus,
taxes.
Plus there was a power struggle between the two guys. They said this estate is worth $100 million. I said, you're out of your mind. I said, you're crazy. We're selling $20, $30 million a year worth of stuff, and we're not even making a dent. So we had a big beef over it. Which I won in the lower court. It went up on appeal. I lost an appeal. I felt that the judge was corrupt, all right? I mean, I felt that he was a guy that was doing a favor for a lawyer on the other side who had investigated him for improprieties in the past. Now, that's my opinion, okay? I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't want to get everything, okay? So, in any case, I got knocked down. I filed for Chapter 11 because I was supposed to get more money, and they told me to give back money. We had a long, bitter struggle at the end of which the judge lost his job. I got out of bankruptcy without going bankrupt, and I did extremely well. So that's it. But
Well, it's not that easy.
It's not that easy. No, it's also not that nice either. I'm passing over part of it, yeah. We leave out the part that's not as nice.
You spiraled into depression.
Oh, I was very depressed, yes, I was terribly depressed. Well, you know, you get sick. I mean, I had depression, and it was a very stressful time, and I used to get up every day. I would throw up, right? And then I would say, what can I do to help myself today, right? And I would do something every day. My friends were very loyal, and I came back, and I got even.
How'd you get even?
I got even by hunting down everybody that I thought hurt me and finding some way to hurt them, and I hurt them.
How would you hurt them?
If you got a guy, they lose their jobs. A lot of them lost their jobs, and I was in a position to influence a lot of them.
Because you become a friend of the governor.
Because I became a friend of a lot of powerful people, and a lot of guys would come to me. It's the same thing. If I saw somebody do something to you that was wrong, not just you had a beef with the guy, there was a disagreement. He really did something to you that was wrong. I would say, well, you know, you can't have that. You know, you're being disrespectful to my friend. You know, I can't have that. If you get a chance to do something to them, you do something to them. So they learned they don't do it again. A lot of my friends came to help me.
You got hit. And
I
you
really
were knocked down because you had been flying high.
Very high.
And you were making a lot of money, thought you had a lot of money coming to you. You received a lot of money.
Right.
You bought a lot of things.
Right.
Right.
And also I think that I had achieved a status in society, and I was desperately wanting to hold on to what I saw as the respect of my community.
Because of you, A, and B, you came from the kind of background.
And also I didn't want to be
from.
embarrassed in front of my children. One of the things that was strongest, and my mother, I really did not want to be embarrassed in front of my mother. My friends looked at me and said, you need help.
Right.
And they came to help me. I mean, you know, those great scenes in the American Westerns, all of a sudden, the Magnificent Seven, the Wild Bunch, where the people come back to help the guy, right? I had guys lined up, some women too. I had some very strong women there. They said, look, you got hurt. We're here to help you. And then people would look into it and say, you know, you got something wrong happening. This wasn't the right, this wasn't right. I had a lot of friends.
Along the way, you knew Bruce Cutler.
Yes, I met Bruce Cutler.
A former prosecutor.
Yeah. You know the story about Bruce Cutler? There's a great story about Bruce Cutler.
Who is Bruce Cutler? First of all, he's famous because he represented John Gotti.
Well, he's a great lawyer. He's
famous because he represented John Gotti.
Yes. He was a very tough Brooklyn Jew. He was a captain of a state champion wrestler in high school. He was in homicide in Brooklyn when I was in homicide in the Bronx. And he's a very able guy, very able lawyer. And I like him a lot. But he's the godfather of my daughter. Scares the heck out of her. Not so much her boyfriends, but the parents of her boyfriends. And she says, oh, yeah, Bruce Cutler is my godfather.
So now you and he together are representing two former New York policemen who are said to have, the charge is what? They
assisted in a commission or committed themselves murdering 10 people on behalf of La Cosa Nostra, the Lucchese family of La Cosa Nostra.
And your defense is?
My defense is it's a frame. And actually, it's a pretty good defense, too. I tell you something. The further I get into the case, I really like this guy. I mean,
this Steve
Caracappa. He was in a major case squad. I represented a big part of the major case squad. They've never had scandals there. He's, you know, and I do the best. I want to do the best I can for the guy. I like him, and you know, I don't think he did it.
What do you think of organized crime?
I hate them. I don't even represent them. I have somebody.
First one you've represented in
I've
a case
represented
involving organized crime before?
No, not many.
Have you represented people from organized crime?
Yes, not many. I don't like them.
You hate them, but represent them?
Sometimes. Not very many. In other words, there are guys that make a career out of representing them. I don't. I don't like them.
Cutler makes a career or not?
Cutler has represented a lot of them.
Because he fell in love with John Gotti or not?
Well, Gotti was a gangster from another era.
Explain to me the Cutler-Gotti relationship.
They were friends. He liked Gotti. Gotti was like an old-fashioned tough guy. I mean, I'm not saying he was a saint, but Bruce liked him, and that's what can I tell you? I didn't approve of it. I mean, I said, Bruce, you could have nothing but aggravation with the guy. It's a dying industry. And, you know,
this is the dying
it
industry.
is, you know, because you can't have organized crime unless you have political control. The only way that organized crime was able to permeate American culture was because when you had Irish organized crime or Jewish organized crime or Italian organized crime, they could have great influence over the political process. You don't have that very much now. Politics is organized crime.
But you do or do not take organized crime figures today?
Rarely. And I won't take them if I'm not comfortable with the kind of case that it is. I just don't like it. I think also it's embarrassing. I represent police commissioners. I represent the governor. I can't represent them and some guy that's the godfather of...
But you still will take their case, you just said.
Sometimes.
Even though you're that close to the governor.
Sometimes I will. Most times I don't. Right?
But what's the difference in most times and sometimes?
Because most times the cases, I think, are are, there's too many murders, there's too much drugs. I would take a case of a guy, for instance, last year I had a case of a guy who supposedly had organized crime connections and he was involved in union activities. Well, I'll tell you something. In New York City, the connection between organized crime and unions goes back a long way. And I like representing this guy. But if he'd come in charged with mass murder and dealing in drugs, I wouldn't do that. I don't want that. Unless I thought he was innocent, I would do it then.
If he'd been unfairly accused of being in the Mafia and he wasn't, or somebody you knew and that kind of stuff.
That's right.
What do they call it? What do they call themselves today?
La Cosa Nostra.
They still do that.
Yes. Then families. They have other names too. They have other ways. A good fellow, a friend of ours, or a friend of ours, I think is what they refer to. Like if you're a wise guy, if you're a made member, they refer to him as a friend of ours.
Tell me what your obsessions are. What are your dreams? What is it that you want to be and do? And
I want to be respected by the people that are actually around me. I want to go into the building where I work and have the person that works the elevator and the person that cleans the place, and then some guy that's a big broker or a big reporter or a publisher say, you know that Eddie Hayes, you can trust him. If you ask him to do something, he'll do it. That's what I want. More than anything.
More than anything.
More than anything.
To be respected.
I want to be respected. I want to be liked, but I want to be respected.
And by a cross-section of people.
Yes. I want people
by
to feel...
reporters and policemen and policewomen and doormen and
right. I want people to say, you can go to Eddie and Eddie will try to help you. If you have a problem and you want to try and fix it, you want to do the right thing, you can go to Eddie and Eddie will do the best he can to help you.
What haven't you done that you want to do?
Oh, well, what I most wish I had done and didn't do was I wish I had been, like, serve my country, like, you know, like be a soldier. But I think what I would like to do that I haven't done, I would like to be able, as an old man, to turn back and look at my life and say, I lived an honorable life, I did what I could for people, and when I was knocked down, I got up. That's what I'd like to be able to do.
And what's your greatest insecurity today?
That I won't be able to do that. That I'll fail, that should be fearful at a critical time, that I'll be weak.
You worry about that?
Oh, night and day. I don't worry about it night and day, but I worry about it. I say, Eddie, whatever happens, no matter how badly you get hurt, get up.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Eddie Hayes, a friend of mine and a friend of a lot of people. A fascinating story of one man's life, and he tells all of the flaws and all of the things that make him a unique character in New York or anywhere. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Even The Godfather couldn't have dreamed this one up. U.S. prosecutors allege that 2 retired New York City police detectives who worked organized crime cases were actually paid Mafia hitmen themselves who contributed to 8 murders. One of the suspects had even gone on to become a Hollywood actor, best known for his roles as a mobster. U.S. attorneys say Louis Eppolito, known here as the character Fat Andy in the movie Goodfellas, was arrested Wednesday in Las Vegas, where he has lived since retiring. Eppolito was picked up at this Las Vegas restaurant along with his former partner, Stephen Caracappa. Prosecutors say the 2 men did more than just murder for the mob.
Caracappa and Eppolito were paid handsomely for selling out the files of the NYPD.
Charges against the men include 8 murders, 2 attempted murders, 1 murder conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and after their retirement as detectives, distributing drugs. Prosecutors allege that in 1987, Lucchese crime family underboss Anthony Queso hired the 2 detectives for $4,000 a month to act as hitmen. One of the first people the detectives allegedly helped kill was this man, James Heidel, a member of a rival crime family. Queso told investigators years ago that the 2 detectives had been on his payroll, but the charges never went anywhere until now. It's noteworthy that Eppolito was once the 11th most decorated cop in New York history, and after retirement wrote a book entitled Mafia Cop, the story of an honest cop. Jim Stewart, CBS News, Washington.
Outrageous than the one you're about to hear. It's the story of 2 New York City police officers who stand accused of being hired killers for the Mafia. Stephen Caracappa and Louis Eppolito, 2 highly decorated former detectives, are set to go on trial next month, charged with the murders of 10 people, murders committed on the orders of a vicious mob boss. Tonight, for the first time, one of those detectives, Stephen Caracappa, who is free on bail, answers the allegations that he betrayed his badge and became a Mafia hitman.
How do you respond to that?
Totally ridiculous. It's ludicrous. Anybody that knows me knows I love the police department. I couldn't kill anybody. I shot a guy once on a job, and I still think about it. Bothers me.
If you're not involved, why did they go after you?
I could come up with 100 different scenarios, but none of the scenarios make any sense to me myself. All I know is that I am here now, and I'm fighting for my life. I'm fighting for my reputation. I want to be vindicated of this, and I'm mad and I'm angry.
For most of his 23-year career in the New York City Police Department, Stephen Caracappa was widely respected for his tenacity and savvy in cracking complicated cases. He rose from street patrolman to undercover narcotics officer to first-grade detective, receiving numerous commendations along the way. He helped create the prestigious Organized Crime Homicide Unit. His mission was to investigate the Lucchese crime family, but instead, prosecutors say that in 1985, Caracappa and his former partner Louis Eppolito actually joined the family and began working for its brutal boss, Anthony Gaspipe Casso.
I have two detectives that work the major squad team for the New York Police Department.
What were their names?
Lou Eppolito and Steve. Steve, I can't, he's got a long last name. Kappa's.
Caracappa?
Yeah, Caracappa, whatever it is. I can't say it all the time, you know? Louis is a big guy, he works out. Steve, a little small, skinny guy.
I interviewed Anthony Gaspipe Casso in 1998 in prison, where he is serving a life sentence after admitting to 36 murders. He told me about the extraordinary relationship he had with detectives Caracappa and Eppolito. He also told his story to federal prosecutors, spelling out how, for a hefty salary, Caracappa and Eppolito would walk right up to Casso's enemies, trick them into believing they were under arrest, and then deliver them to Casso to be executed. That's exactly what Casso told us the detectives did to a young hood named Jimmy Heidel.
They put him in the car. The kid thought they were taking him to the station house, but they took him to a garage. When they got him to the garage, they laid him on the floor, they tied his feet, his hands, cuffs, put him in the trunk of the car. After that, I killed the kid. Myself. At that time, I gave Louis and Steve, I think, $45,000 for them delivering them to me.
You gave them a bonus for delivering someone to you killed?
Right. Well, they wanted to kill him for me. I didn't even have to do that. They were going to get him, kill him, and throw him, do whatever I wanted to do with him.
I don't know Heidel, never picked up Heidel. I never met Anthony Casso. I don't know Anthony Casso.
Never paid by Anthony Casso?
No, sir.
Why would Anthony Casso lie?
I don't know. To save himself, I would assume. But why would he use me? I don't know.
Casso was in fact hoping to save himself and reduce his sentence when he first told his astonishing account to investigators 12 years ago. But prosecutors say they couldn't charge detectives Eppolito and Caracappa then because they couldn't prove his story. But now they have witnesses to many of the murders who corroborate what Casso had to say. Among them, Jimmy Heidel's mother, who told investigators that the detectives came to her house looking for her son a few hours before he was abducted and killed. And a garage worker who told authorities where to dig up the body of another man, Caracappa and Eppolito, allegedly buried here beneath this lot in Brooklyn. The most brazen crime former detectives Eppolito and Caracappa are accused of took place here along New York City's Belt Parkway. Allegedly, in broad daylight, the two detectives pulled over a car driven by a mobster named Eddie Lino. They flashed their badges and, according to prosecutors, shot him dead.
I gave them $75,000. They killed him cowboy style. They pulled alongside of him, they shot him, they made him crash into the fence alongside the Belt Parkway on the service road. Right? Then Steve got out of the car, ran across the street, and finished shooting him, finished killing him in the car.
I was a New York City detective for 23 years. We don't go around killing people. I did not kill Eddie Leno. I'm not a cowboy.
Yeah, but I mean, being on the police force doesn't mean automatically I'm a good guy.
No.
There have been guys on the police force who have killed.
Yes.
So that doesn't, that's not a good answer for me.
Well,
to say I didn't do it because I'm on the job.
No, it's my answer. It's my answer because I have pride in myself, Mr. Bradley. I wouldn't do that. Put my life in jeopardy, my family, disgrace the badge, disgrace the city, take everything that I'd worked for my whole life and throw it away and kill somebody in the street like a cowboy? It's not my style. It's not me.
If you thought you wouldn't get caught?
Get caught. Everybody gets caught. And the person who did this is going to get caught.
Caracappa says he's also speaking for his friend and co-defendant Louis Eppolito, who declined our request for an interview.
He's not the monster that the newspapers portrayed him to be. We'll put up the evidence to show that we couldn't have done these crimes. We just couldn't have done them.
But prosecutors say Stephen Caracappa left a paper trail, a key piece of evidence, proving he used his position to access police department computers and funnel confidential information to Anthony Casso about the whereabouts of his enemies. One of them was a mobster named Nicholas Guido. Investigators say Caracappa ran that name through his computer, mistakenly came up with an address for the wrong Nicholas Guido, and a few weeks later, it led Casso to kill an innocent man.
I don't remember running Nicholas Guido in a computer, but if they have a printout saying I did, I probably did. I ran countless of names in the computer.
So you're saying it's just a coincidence that a month after you ran the name of Nicholas Guido through the computer, that a month later, a Nicholas Guido, an innocent man, was killed, shot to death?
I don't know if it's a coincidence, but if I did anything and I had to run a name, it's down on paper and it's documented why I did it.
And who you did it for?
And who I did it for. And I definitely didn't do it for any wise guy.
Stephen Caracappa's lawyer, Ed Hayes, argues it would have been implausible for a first-grade detective like Caracappa to make such a rookie mistake.
If he had been looking for the right Nicky Guido, it would have been easy for him to find him. It's practically impossible to me to assume that he would have made this mistake because he has based his whole career on avoiding that kind of mistake. Assuming you're going to kill people for money, you want to kill the right guy, not the wrong guy. Otherwise, you got to kill two people for the price of one, right?
Maybe he was just sloppy.
Yeah, maybe he made a mistake, or maybe he didn't do it. But in our system, you don't convict somebody on a maybe.
While that may be, prosecutors have also obtained information from a former top associate of Anthony Gaspipe Casso named Burton Kaplan, a convicted narcotics trafficker who claims he personally paid detectives Caracappa and Eppolito when they committed murders for Gaspipe Casso. Ed Hayes says neither Casso nor Kaplan have any credibility.
You have several individuals that even by criminal standards are revolting. And I think that they saw this as an opportunity to make a plan where they could get special treatment and get out of jail. And in fact, Burt Kaplan, who's a major drug dealer, a super large money launderer, has gotten out of jail because of making these accusations.
So you think you're being framed?
Mr. Bradley, I don't think it. I know it.
And Stephen Caracappa says he has a good idea why he was implicated in the first place. His relationship with Louis Eppolito, who came from a family of mobsters and wrote a book about it. Mafia Cop, the story of an honest cop whose family was the mob. In the book, Eppolito brags about socializing with mobsters and torturing suspects when he was on the job.
Do you ever worry that somebody on the jury might know of that book and say, well, if he did those things, it might not be that much of a leap to kill somebody for the Mafia, and that you get lumped into that, guilt by association?
It could be, but if you knew Louis Eppolito and you spoke to Louis Eppolito and you spent any time with him, you would see he couldn't do that. The guy is gentle.
But there's a separate case that paints a dark picture of Louis Eppolito involving this man, Barry Gibbs, who spent 19 years in prison for a murder prosecutors now say he didn't commit. He was freed 4 months ago after a judge ruled that Detective Eppolito, who investigated the crime, intimidated the only eyewitness in the case into falsely testifying against Gibbs.
He's a corrupt cop and he's no good. And that's the end of it. He ruined my life. He could have done that to anybody. It just so happened it was me. He could have done it to you. He could have done it to anybody sitting here.
I'm jogging on this path right here.
That eyewitness who testified against Gibbs was a former Marine, Peter Mitchell. In 1986, Mitchell saw a man dumping a woman's body along this road in Brooklyn. He gave a description of the suspect to Eppolito, who was on the scene investigating the murder. And while his description bore no resemblance to Barry Gibbs, Mitchell says Eppolito threatened to hurt him and his family if he refused to pick Gibbs out of a police lineup and point the finger at him in court.
When you testified against him, Barry Gibbs, you knew that you were lying.
Yes, I did.
You knew that your testimony would put him in prison.
Yeah, but you know what? I want this cop after me.
How could you do that?
How could I do that? No. My family was on the line here. If I had to do it, I'll do it again.
But he was innocent.
Yeah, well, either me dying or get a bullet shot in the head, or my mother go to jail, or my father go into jail. Come on.
So you thought if you didn't finger Barry Gibbs, you'd be dead?
I'll be dead. Like this.
As for Barry Gibbs, he would still be in prison today if prosecutors hadn't stumbled across his case file last spring during a search of Louis Eppolito's home. Eppolito has not been charged with any criminal wrongdoing in this case and maintains that Barry Gibbs is guilty. But the former detective made a brief statement to reporters about the 10 murder charges against him.
I was a very highly decorated cop. I worked very hard my whole life, and I just want the people to know that I'm not the person that they're portraying me.
Louis, were you ever a bad cop?
Never in my life.
The question for the jury in this case, which goes to trial next month, is, did two decorated police officers cross the thin blue line and become hitmen for the Mafia?
You must know that if you get convicted on even one of these murder charges, you'll go down in history as one of the most corrupt cops in the history of the department.
That's true, Mr. Braley, but I won't be convicted because I didn't do this. Didn't do it, so I'm not going to be convicted. I won't have that on my epitaph.